I want to read a paragraph, and you may wonder why this is being read at the very beginning, and then after I'm through you may have an even greater question as to why it was read, but that's all right. Self-awareness, reason, and imagination have disrupted the harmony which characterizes animal existence. Their emergence has made man into an anomaly, into the freak of the universe. Man is part of nature, subject to her physical laws and unable to change them, yet he transcends the rest of nature. He is set apart while being apart. He is homeless, yet chained to the home he shares with all creatures. Cast into this world at an accidental place and time, he is forced out of it again accidentally. Being aware of himself, he realizes his powerlessness and the limitations of his existence. He visualizes his own end, death. Never is he free from the dichotomy of his existence. He cannot rid himself of his mind, even if he should want to. He cannot rid himself of his body as long as he's alive, and his body makes him want to be alive. Reason, man's blessing, is also his curse. It forces him to cope everlastingly with the task of solving an insoluble dichotomy. Human existence is different in this respect from that of all other organisms. It is in a state of constant and unavoidable disequilibrium. Man's life cannot be lived by repeating the pattern of his species, and yet man must live. Man is the only animal that can be bored, that can be discontented, that can feel evicted from paradise. Man is the only animal for whom his own existence is a problem which he has to solve and from which he cannot escape. He cannot go back to the pre-human state of harmony with nature. He must proceed to develop his reason until he becomes the master of nature and the master of himself. And that's about all I'd better read of that. Now, in the days that marked the beginning of our church 6.5 years ago, one of the most salutary and wonderful things about those beginning days of formal structure was the fact that for 6 weeks, Sunday morning after Sunday morning, before there was a single member of the church, for there was no membership, no organized structure, Sunday after Sunday, this group of people thought together about the meaning of the commitment, which commitment would be theirs if they decided to come into the church. So it was like a large seminar. Only one person did all the talking. But there was the free exchange of thinking, and at the end of the 6 weeks, all the people who had followed that process knew whether or not this was the sort of thing of which they wanted to be a part. Now, that is very important, because it is one of the interestingly significant things about religion. Everybody is sure that he knows what religion is, and no one is quite sure. that he knows what religion is. So that it is important that now and then we should stop and take stock, think about the meaning of our fundamental commitment in our religious fellowship. And this is a commitment about which we are talking, and it is not a creed. The lines that I'm considering this morning, I affirm my need of a growing understanding of all men as sons of God. That's as far as we're going this morning. All men as sons of God. I affirm my need. It is very interesting in the first place, then, to know that a part of the genius of our fellowship and the genius of the commitment is a recognition of the potential possibility of the individual's growth and understanding. I affirm my need for a growing understanding, that I don't have it quite. I don't have the answer. I'm not perfect. My knowledge is inadequate. I have not arrived, but I represent that which is essentially creative and in process. And this is a very important insight because it says at once, you see, that man is not only an object which has a history, but it says that man is the kind of organism which is aware at any moment in the present of the fact that he has a history, that the present has in it the past, and the present has in it that which is essentially potential, that which is reaching into the future, reaching into that which is not yet experienced, that which is not yet, that which has not yet come to pass, this growing understanding. And it's very interesting that the concept of a growing understanding, the need for a growing understanding, would be the first one that appears in the commitment. Whereas ordinarily the assumption is, with reference to religion and religious experience, that you have the truth, and you urge people to come in to share your truth, come in out of their no truth, out of their darkness, to come in to share yours. But here there is the insistence that we want a growing understanding, that we rate growing understanding, that we are alive. Now, the important thing then comes after that. The growing understanding of all men as as sons of God. What do we mean by that? There are two considerations that I present to you this morning. The first is that here is a recognition of men, all men, as children of life. And let's dwell on that for a little. I am a child of life. And as a child of life, I am deeply involved in the living process. I'm deeply committed to life, and life as defined first and primarily in terms of my own basic organic survival. I want to live. I do not want to die. And as a child of life, self-preservation becomes the basic motivation of my life. We recognize the significance of that even in our statutes. For if I kill you, and I can convince a court of law that I killed you in defense of my own life, then the judgment is suspended. And there is the formal recognition that I have the right to preserve my own life if that life is being threatened by some other life. As a child of life, I'm committed to my own survival. Now, as a child of life, I find that I am constantly involved in a rather ruthless and brutal destruction of other lives, other living things, in order that my own life might continue. And I do feel sorry for the cow and for the pig and for the chicken or the duck or the goose, but I want to live, and it's unfortunate that I must lay a primary demand upon the life of something else that wants to live, but I give my recognition of that a prior claim. So I say, too bad, but I'll have to eat you. Now, I will be as reverent as I can in the process. I will pause before I eat and bow my head, and I will let a sense of reverence come over me in recognition of the cruel dilemma in which I'm involved. But I want to live. Now, I decide the same thing, you see, with reference to human beings who are involving me at that point. I've got to work. I must somehow get enough economic goods so that I can protect myself both from the impersonal operation of the world of nature on the one hand, by shelter and clothing and food, and I must protect myself from the impersonal operation of society on the other hand, by getting some corner that would be uniquely mine in some sense, and building a wall around it that society may not invade it and render me inconsequential and of no no value. I must do that. So if you are threatening my bread, if in the fulfillment of your own life you render my life increasingly insecure, then I fight you. I organize all of the powers and resources of my being and fling them in as defiantly as possible into the threat that your life makes to my life. It is not that I hate you, but I do not want you to be responsible for bringing an untimely end to my days. All of that as a child of life. And the morality and the ethics that may rise out of that kind of will to survival are all a morality and an ethic related basically and profoundly to the central concern of self-preservation. Shall I do this or that? What bearing will doing this or that have on this central thing? Now that is man, the child of life. Now we recognize that. But the insistence of our commitment is that we should recognize men as children of God, as sons of God. And that brings us to the second thing. A child of life, child of God. And here, the central orientation is of another kind, and because it is, it precipitates all kinds of conflicts in us. For there does come a moment when I deliberately transcend my will to physical survival in order that my life might become instrumental to ends that go beyond my physical survival and its crucial character. But let me ask you, under what circumstances are you willing to jeopardize your own life as a child of life in order to be true to some other loyalty that renders paltry and insignificant and even unworthy the continuation of your physical existence? What? Can you think about it? I remember, you were part of a very personal reference. Here, I think I can say it. But I remember some years ago when I lived in Washington, and our mother came up from Florida to spend some time with us, and it was necessary for her to have a very thorough physical examination. And when the doctors had finished checking her thoroughly, they agreed that she needed an operation, and she needed it immediately. An operation that was, according to them, at least 20 years overdue. And we had a family council about it. And everybody who could talk had something to say about the advisability of having this operation, which involved going to the hospital the next morning. Everybody spoke. And then it happened that day I was presiding. So I asked my mother, what did she think, since she was the person who was going to the hospital? What do you think about it? And I shall always remember what she said. She said, as long as my mother lived, and I was the only person who was at hand to take care of her, and therefore I was needed desperately by her, I would not do anything, the doing of which would give me a sudden exposure to the possibility of death. But inasmuch as my mother is no longer living, and there is no one who is really dependent upon me moment by moment in order that their life might be continued, then I can run the risk of sudden death, which may be the result of the operation, without feeling that I'm doing violence, either to my own concerns or to the welfare of someone else. For whether I live or die is not crucial in the way that it would be if my continuing to live guaranteed the continuation and the comfort of another human being. Now that's what I'm talking about. When something new, I hope I can make this clear, when something new emerges that is not quite present in man as he functions merely as a child of life, when an overtone appears, when I recognize clearly and definitively that death is not the worst thing in the world, that there is a dimension of my personality that responds to the movement of forces which I would call the movement of a spirit that forces me again and again and again to go beyond the demands that obtain when I regard my life merely as one who is a child of life, and that is a moral dimension, a moral quality. So when I say I say I affirm my need of a growing understanding of all men as sons of God, I am saying that it is my awareness that I need to broaden my understanding of the meaning of my own life in relation to the things that relate me and tie me to my fellows through the fact that I am a child of life that is always making certain radical advances on my experience as a child of life, that I am capable of recognizing moral and ethical and spiritual responsibilities that transcend at any particular moment my involvement merely in the life process. So I will sacrifice my life, which is in direct contradiction, you see, to the insistent logic of my own life as a child of life. I will sacrifice my life if, in the sacrificing of my life, I seem in that moment to become that which identifies me with values and meanings and purposes that extend beyond the mere mechanics of my survival as a human animal. Now this is very amazing, because here we are in the kind of fellowship in which both of these things are at work in us all the time. In my primary relationships with you, what is it that guides me? Is it my indigenous, my basic will to survive? Is it the result of my recognition of you as a threat to my own survival? That's one. Or there's something else intervene here that puts a new dimension in my relationship. So I know, for instance, that I know that I'm right. I know that my position is the right one. I know that my idea is correct because it is an extension of me, an extension of my meaning, and it's my idea. And through long years as a child of life, I've had to defend my own against all comers in order that I might survive up to this point. But I'm in a fellowship. I am in a fellowship. And so I may say, well, I will hear what you have to say. I will for the sake of the larger spiritual dimension, I will run the risk, even of the threatening of my own sense of personal and private security growing out of the vested right that I have in my thoughts, my feelings, and the rest of it, with the confidence that there is in the fellowship itself that which will sustain me and guarantee me and support me. Or I may take it just the other way around. I may know that you are wrong. I may know it. It's obvious to everybody but you that you're wrong. But I will go over and over in my mind, combing my total resources until I find how I can communicate to you